Mini episode 1205 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FDH Lounge mini episode number 1205. This is FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris here, and we are continuing on with our coronavirus series here, the Coronavirus Crisis 2020 in the FDH Lounge. We are welcoming back to the show a gentleman who we have been privileged to have on a number of times previously. Most recently, it was, I believe, last summer with his great book, Four Friends, and the story of JFK Jr. and others who had gone to school together at Andover. Great bestseller, the latest in a long line of bestsellers. Our topic today is of a different nature, and as an author and as a financial columnist, he has written extensively, of course, about Wall Street. He is somebody who has worked on Wall Street previously. First time we had him on the show, actually, was, I believe, February of 2009. So we have bookended the years in between, which we steadily came out of the Great Recession, and now we are going back into whatever this is. It's the coronavirus crisis that is enveloping public health, but certainly finance as well at the moment. And given the number of people's jobs involved, it might be a race neck and neck to say which aspect of this is worse. So we will plow into all that and much, much more. Pleased to welcome back to the show author, columnist, and as I say, former Wall Street executive William Cohan. William, thank you so much for being here with us today on the show in these troubled times.
Well, Rick, thank you for having me. I wish the times weren't troubled, but they are.
They are. Here we are in all of this, and in terms of looking at this, I have deliberately tried in the last 72 hours to stay away from any such discussions because they were just getting to be really, really weighing on me excessively, and we all owe it to ourselves to try to be kind to ourselves wherever possible. But unfortunately, I do have around me some deniers still at this point, or people prepared to lay everything at the feet of the quote-unquote panic. So is there anything at all you would say to these people at this point, assuming that they can still be led to reason as far as taking precautions?
Well, again, as you correctly pointed out, I'm a former Wall Street banker, written about Wall Street for many years, and written about the last financial crisis extensively in two books, any number of articles. I think I'm a student of human nature at this point, par excellence, and I mean, I think that, there's something to sort of lay aside a political sort of judgment and, hatred or political divide, or, people who don't trust or like the media. I think at this point, science is clear, and even if you don't believe the science is, it's hard to imagine that might be, people are dying, and this is not, by the way, the first time that the human race has faced this kind of health epidemic.
Right.
There's no denying sort of what's going on in the financial markets, and so people, financial markets are a confidence game. And, confidence was unbelievably high in mid-February, and now that all that confidence is lost, people are losing their jobs left and right, unemployment rates are way up, whole sort of industries are going into decline, hibernation, and that's like the best case. So, you can deny what's going on, you can, pretend it's not going on, and maybe that's what we're with it. I don't know. I'm not one to judge, but there's no question that things are radically different on March 18th than they were on February 18th. So in a month's time, the whole country about our economy, about our collective health, about our social lives, about our cultural lives has just changed, dramatically and extraordinarily quickly. And I think that is very difficult for a lot of people to grasp. But one way or another, they're going to have to come around to dealing with it. And I think we're being asked to do. I mean, this is my generation, my kids' generation. They're not used to sacrifice. But my parents' generation was asked to sacrifice and did sacrifice. This is our time to sacrifice. We're going to have to sacrifice, and it's not really, we're not necessarily being asked to go off to war. We're being asked to stay away from each other, fight the war on a molecular basis. I think we should do that.
Very well said. I think the comparisons to World War II, I've been kind of heeding that in recent days here, the sacrifices on the home front, and I think it's a lot very much the same in that way. In a public health sense here first, and that is, fairly opaque to a lot of us because, again, even the experts will tell you they can only make their best guesses at it. But in terms of whether this moment appears to be too late to head off the fate of Italy, what now it seems to like France is joining them in that, whatever. Again, not hopeful on a social level if you were looking last weekend at things like the pub crawl in Wrigleyville and that kind of stuff. On an anecdotal level, it doesn't seem like we're stepping up to the challenge as much, and that's why more of these restrictions are coming. Do you have a gut feeling either way as to whether it's already too late to avoid the fate of Italy or whether we can kind of tighten up in time to make it at least a little less bad?
Well, again, I'm not a health expert.
Sure.
By any means. I'm a student of human nature and of our society and of our country. Look, we're not China. We're not a centrally driven society where if you don't follow the rules, you get put in jail or lose your life. And I think in that kind of society, especially with 1.4 billion people, I guess if you don't follow the rules, then it could have been much worse. And to some extent, we should be thankful that they showed us how this can be done to keep the worst from happening. I mean, but we are an open society. That's both a blessing and a curse. And it's, I wouldn't trade that to live in a totalitarian society. But, in times like these, it's extremely difficult to get people to do the right thing unless, nobody in America likes to be told what to do, right? That is very much part of American psyche. We don't like to be told what to do. So somehow people have to come to this on their own. This is the right thing to do, not only for their own health, but for the health of their parents, because we all have parents, or their grandparents, or their neighbors and friends. I mean, the only way to, flatten the curve, as they say, is to not interact with other people. And it's unpleasant, yes, but so is getting the coronavirus and not being able to breathe and dying before we're supposed to. I think that we're being asked to keep away from people, other people. We're being asked, take oxygen away from the virus, which is a fire, and let it burn itself out. We're being asked to do that, and it seems totally logical and reasonable to me. I think that one nice thing about this, if you can point to a nice thing, is that there's no villain in this. In the 2008 financial crisis, the villain was Wall Street and the banks, and so they became villainized. They became something we all love to hate. It's easy to hate them, it's easy to blame them. my family, we're doing that. Are we getting testy with each other occasionally? Yes. It's tough to be cooped up all day. Would I rather be, doing things that I've been doing for my whole life? Yes, but I imagine that the generations that had to fight World War II or lived through the Depression, my father's generation, had it a lot worse. And, we've been fairly fortunate, since World War II, and that, most of us haven't had to been asked to fight in wars or suffer, economically for terribly long. And, this is our time to sacrifice, and we should do it. And we should also, get on kind of a bit of a war footing when it comes to, boosting the economy up and the stimulus package. And frankly, I think that, $1 trillion, which is a lot, is probably enough. It should be more like $3 trillion, which would be the kind of spending we did during World War II to, buck up our economy then. And I don't think that's a mistake. I think that's what we need to do to keep people able to, buy groceries and put gas in their car, or, pay their mortgages or rent, as more and more people begin to lose their jobs and whole industries start going down the tubes. So, we're being asked to sacrifice, and there's still such a thing as a free lunch. So, let's just get our minds around doing this and do what Americans do best, which is pull together in times of trouble.
Excellent point, William, and I want to put a pin in that on what you were saying and come back to it in a second about the economy and what can be done to try to rescue it at this point. But first, I just want to build on what you were saying about what our obligation is right now, and again, in that shared sacrifice kind of a way for society right now. One of our contributors to the show, and normally I'm not shy about mentioning names, I'm not going to at this point because I don't want to shame him for the point that he made to me, but just the whole point about how, it's going to be rough and being, we're all going to be deprived from social contact. And I said to him, look, though, technology is what it is. None of us are Anne Frank sitting in the attic, right? I've talked more on the phone in the last couple of days than I have in a long time. I mean, I haven't even Skyped anybody or FaceTimed yet, but I'm sure that's coming. I mean, this whole notion of the sacrifice that's involved, William, it does have to be put into the context of the tools that we do have. If this was even 15 years ago, I suppose people would still be on the phone a lot, but you didn't have cell plans with flat rates, basically. I mean, we can stay in contact with anyone and everyone around us with the flip of a switch here, figuratively. So that just makes it all the sillier that people don't want to do what's necessary.
Well, obviously, I couldn't agree with you more, and I think that, as bad as it is, and it will continue to be, by the way, I think we're probably in the second or third inning of this in this country. And, it could be a 9-inning game, it could be an extra inning game. It would be a lot worse without social media. It would be a lot worse without the connectivity that most of us have, access to the internet. A lot of people can do their jobs via the internet and group work that way that would not even have been even remotely possible 10 or 15 years ago. And I think as bad as it's going to get economically, because obviously there are plenty of people that have to do, if you work in a restaurant, or a place like Boeing, you're in trouble, it's a tough situation, or the airlines. So, that can't be done virtually, but a lot of things can be done virtually, and will be done virtually, and are being done virtually, and I think that's, a very good thing. Obviously, social media can be, very, sort of vile, force in our society, and creates a lot of negativity and shaming and all sorts of bullying, and, can be totally awful, but I think it is the moment where it's very useful that you can still be connected, together, and be in touch with people, and way. But we can basically stay as connected as we could, maybe 75% of what we used to do. And if it's 2 or 3 months, again, save lives. I think that's relatively easy thing to ask us to do.
Sure, and I think that's absolutely valid. And in terms of what we're talking about here, in terms of how we get out of this, and putting aside some of the strictures that people would want to have in terms of their normal belief systems coming into this thing, what I want to ask you about, and this is not to take your quote out of context, but to apply it here when you said previously no such thing as a free lunch. To somebody like me, and again, listen, I am in favor of priming the pump at this point in time. I am certainly not, under normal circumstances, what you'd call a Keynesian individual. Under normal circumstances, I'm the kind of guy who screeches about running the printing presses too much. And there is part of me that's got fear that milk could be $50 a gallon by Christmas at this rate. But I'm putting that aside, right? I'm saying we got to do what we got to do. We'll worry about tomorrow when we get out of this crisis. What would you say to anybody like me that's got fears of, are we creating another potential monster down the road by what some of the short-term remedies are, even if they're necessary right now?
We already have too much debt as a nation, $26 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
We're probably like the 13th most indebted country in the world. The situation isn't going to help, and we may have to, incur as much as $3 trillion more of debt to pull ourselves out of this. And that's not good, and I don't mean to
Sure.
minimize that, but the silver lining again is the interest rates are very low, so issuing that debt won't cost much on an annual basis, because the debt service of that will be low-ish, lower than it would be normally if interest rates were higher, which is a whole different topic, interest rates, but if you're an issuer, it's a great time to issue a debt if you can, and certainly the U.S. government can issue debt. And our deficits are already around $1 trillion. That's not great either, but look, this is a period where we're going to have to take care of people.
Sure.
People are going to lose their jobs. People, have to pay their rent. People can't get food and get gas. People can't get, new jobs. We're going through a period where, literally, we had the unbelievable amount of employment. Now we're going to have a high rate of unemployment. The Treasury Secretary predicted it could go as high as 20%. Well, if that's the case, that's depression-like unemployment, and we're going to need to take care of people. And that means we're going to need to put money in their pockets and the government, because it's the only organization that can print money, and we're going to have to figure it out later. I can tell you one thing, once we do get through this, however that is, the demand for goods and services and going out and bars and movie theaters and all the things that we're sacrificing now is going to be extraordinary. And people are just going to, after the, the austerity of the 1910s, in the 1913 crisis, and beyond, in World War I, we had the Roaring '20s. That didn't end pretty well either, but, there'll be plenty of pent-up demand, and the economy will be strong again, and we'll have to somehow get down this debt that we've accumulated, and hopefully there'll be a fiscally responsible administration and to do that. And you will hopefully see that it was worth it.
Yeah, and that.
These are crystal ball predictions, and who knows, whether, how this is going to go.
Oh yeah, I mean, because we did a segment on the show recently, third time we've done this, our February 29th time capsule of predicting events up to the next February 29th, and the caveat going in was, coronavirus could change everything. William, I'm not sure there's one thing that we predicted at the time that isn't going to be affected by this, so Yeah, who knows, especially now that we're into the crisis, and we are. And as a long-standing debt hawk, I'd like to think that once things get good again, that we could maybe get a little bit of religion on that subject and address these things. But I guess we're going to have to see on that one. In the near term, and again, you had a really excellent article in Vanity Fair, Why the Fed's Rate Cut Tanked the Market, and with your thoughts on that. And it was the same thought I had at the time, just in my gut, of you're firing all your bullets here to do this, and if it doesn't work or it's deemed not to work, then what? And I think that's why they're kind of having to scrape here at this point for coming up with different issues. Do you have any sense of what drove that kind of desperation move at that moment in time? Was it a fear that it was going completely off the rails then, and they needed to do something? Because it seems curious that they wouldn't, as weird as it sounds, wait for it to go lower, just because it can always go lower, and that's the risk. If you do it and it doesn't work, then what?
Well, look, Jay Powell's not the economy, so, I don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I think it didn't work because, lowering Fed funds rate 50 basis points on a Sunday afternoon, between meetings, just signaled that this thing is likely to get way worse than anybody had expected. And rates were already low, and it's like, as I said, you can't push on a string. The rates have already been way low for 10 years, 12 years. Now you're starting on a five. Again, signaling to the market that this is way worse than we thought, or the recession is way worse than we thought, and so psychologically it backfired. It didn't help people. It's not like people haven't already borrowed as much money as they possibly could, or were able to, already in the last 10 years, making interest rates zero as opposed to 50 basis points. Isn't really going to matter now that the flight to quality. A lot of people won't be able to borrow under any circumstances because banks and investors just, aren't any deals getting done. There's no high yield deals. There's no mortgage back. There's no product out there at any rate. So, I think that the switch is literally been flipped, and so lowering interest rates is going to do it. The only good thing, and maybe this is what Powell was doing, is he figured there'd have to be this huge stimulus plan, and the government's going to have to issue trillions of dollars of debt, and therefore the interest rates are going to be very low, and so making them lower means they won't have to pay much interest on that debt, and that's probably a good thing. So if that's the result of lowering short-term interest rates this far, and sort of by starting QE5 now, you're going to keep longer-term interest rates low as well, or try to, then the cost of this new financing that's inevitable now, the stimulus program, is going to be less than it otherwise would, and that's probably worthwhile doing. But in terms of, bucking up market confidence like the Fed rate cut normally would do, investors just saw right through that and said, okay, it's getting worse than we thought.
And I would guess that is primarily what he was going for, was trying to reinforce the market set of confidence, as opposed to what you're talking about, this bank shot here. And you're right, it will help with the debt financing. In a way, it could almost make him kind of the Rudy Gobert of government circles here, because I've come around to the point of view that, as mad as I was last week, Rudy Gobert saved a lot more lives than he threatened, because boom, the sports leagues were shutting down right away after that, and that was when we really started to get serious about this whole thing here too. Maybe Jay Powell, his move didn't work the way he wanted it to, and much like Rudy Gobert, maybe and hopefully there's some good that comes out of it in the ways you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's true. The market just went into a free fall after that, and it's continued. I down probably lower, but I mean at least 17.5. That's what it was right before Trump's election, and I think psychologically, even though it's completely random, I think there's probably a feeling among investors, let's just wipe out the entire Trump era of gains and reset and try to be more rational here about what equities are worth. And a lot of people, including me, are suffering every day. It goes down the tubes, so what can you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And but before we steer it around at the end here to the political side of this, I have one more question for you on the Wall Street end of this governmental policy and everything. So I'm getting the sense here from talking to you, and it's the same kind of sense I've gotten in other places too. Would I be correct in assuming that you believe at this point that liquidity across the board kind of is the key to getting us out of this way? You've already addressed getting money into our pockets directly, but all these businesses out here, small businesses that are threatened by this, making sure that they can kind of stay afloat. Because that would seem to me that it would be kind of the biggest key in this whole time here, right? If the government's going to be involved, that it would be on that, on making sure that we have an apparatus across the board that looks as much like the world before this as humanly possible. So is liquidity really at the heart of this whole thing as far as helping us to come out of this at the end?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely that's what the Fed and the Treasury are doing. It's one thing for the equity markets to take, but once the credit markets start freezing up, which is often inevitable in times like this, but doesn't have to be. And I think that the Fed is trying to prevent that with whatever $1.5 trillion program to keep the commercial paper market going, all sorts of overnight lending facilities that are going on. I think part of the stimulus program that they should be talking about, and I think they're talking about, are all sorts of small business loans and maybe even direct payment to businesses, and maybe even billion-dollar loans to companies like Boeing. I mean, this is literally essential at this point. It gets back to what we're talking about before. It could be, maybe it should be as much. Donald Trump likes to do things big. Well, let's do things really big and make this a $3 trillion stimulus program to keep us strong, to keep us as strong as we can be for the next 6 months, because it might take 6 months before we're to the other side of this.
Well, Donald Trump very famously has never been very big on political dogma. I mean, you look at the positions that he's changed over the years. So, yeah, I mean, he might have the kind of flexibility it takes, maybe shamelessness, whatever you want to use to switch positions, mold positions to get us out of this. And that brings us to the last element of this that I wanted to ask you about, and that being, again, prior to this, maybe it's just the conventional wisdom, but I was looking at the landscape, and I'm seeing, again, the economy, pretty robust prior to this, very low unemployment rate. Looking at a divide in the Democratic primaries that seems very similar to 4 years ago with Bernie v. the establishment and some of the hard feelings that we're looking to linger out of that. So prior to all of this, I was thinking Trump's election to lose. He still could, and I didn't think he'd win the popular vote, but squeak out an electoral college win again. At this point, I mean, the onus is on him. He has to avoid mass death on his watch. He has to avoid mass economic destruction on his watch. And it's really kind of flipped all the way around, and that Joe Biden, almost by being in the right place at the right time, and there's been more to it than that, obviously, but the way that things have materialized, it would seem like Trump's got his work cut out for him, not least of which because of the early downplaying that he did in this, which will be all over fall attack ads, especially if things go poorly. So what's your sense of the politics of this thing? I know we're right in the middle of it, and to a certain extent, some of the politics are getting tuned down in terms of Trump versus some of the governors because they're having to work together a little bit. But we know the temperature is going to come back up. And as this year goes along, again, I think it's easy to say if this is a disastrous scenario, it's disastrous for Trump. I guess the question would be how much better does it have to get for Trump to have any kind of a decent chance? What are you thinking based on the range of outcomes here on how it may impact the presidential race?
Well, I'm going to take sort of a contrarian view
Sure.
I would have said that, like, going back 2 months,
Mm-hmm.
January, if you think of, like, all the fancy people and rich people who went to Davos, and they were saying, with, 80% certainty they thought Trump would get reelected. I thought then that Trump's chances of getting reelected were actually very poor, because I think he, pumped up the economy, stock market, the bond market, in a very artificial way, and I think people were totally tired on the margin of the shenanigans. This isn't what we want out of a president anymore. And the thing I would say now is, yes, he completely fumbled the response to this for a month, which was politically devastating for him. But now, for whatever reason, and I don't know how it happened, why, maybe the stock market has tumbled many things because he actually got scared enough to start listening to wise people. But now he's sort of with the program and saying some of the right things and doing some of the right things. And 2 weeks in Trump time is like 500 years for somebody else to be like, how can you predict what is going to happen between now and November with this guy? I mean, if this thing somehow the arc of this narrative is less worse than the experts are predicting, that the stimulus package is, say, $3 trillion instead of $1 trillion, the economic recession isn't as bad as people think. I mean, I could certainly see a scenario here where Trump comes out of this looking like a hero, and everybody forgetting how badly he fumbled it in the first instance. And, his re-election prospects might actually not be as bad as one would think they would be. Now, of course, that means a lot of things have to be done intelligently from here on out, which is very hard to predict or assume when it comes to Trump. So I think I would still say his chances of re-election are quite low, but I think they are higher than I thought they were in January, believe it or not.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. You and I have both turned around on that, but in different ways. And yeah, it's going to be a political year unlike any other, and there's going to be delicacies in terms of navigating this situation that, again, Trump really doesn't do delicate situations well. So yet another thing that doesn't vote in his favor. But again,
if he's listening to some adults in the room that he's never listened to before, because he's so scared and so worried now that his presidency is literally spiraling out of control, that he actually stops listening to people who know what they're talking about, as opposed to Jared Kushner, then I think he actually may have a chance. But, that's a big if, and it's not his nature. And so, he's 72 years old, he's never relied on anybody but his own. And, of course, he's always managed to make that work for him. This virus that he can't even see may be beyond even his ability to, make a bad outcome into a good outcome. So, it may not work. I think if the stimulus isn't big enough, if people don't, segregate themselves socially, if they don't take it seriously, and like a lot of people start dying, like hundreds of thousands, and we go into a depression, that these next stuff so much.
well, yeah, and this is a thing too. And again, I'll stipulate up front, what it says about Trump is pretty obvious. But I will say this: for a guy who's not everybody's cup of tea, I truly appreciate some of the work done since the beginning of the year from Tucker Carlson. First on Iran, because I'm a common sense non-interventionist. I was afraid we were going down a very bad path there. He is credited with getting in Trump's ear, steering him out of that. And the commentary that he did on the coronavirus and that the elected officials need to take it seriously, people were saying at the time that was for an audience of one. And apparently that was the case, and apparently it worked. So, again, for a guy that I fully realize is not everybody's cup of tea, you know, I'm about ready to give the guy Time Man of the Year, and it's only March.
Well, to me, it's pathetic that, you know, Trump is always commentators on Fox News. Whatever, we don't need.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. You know, what it says about Trump is pretty obvious, but this is the world we're in, and so all we can do is hope that it's going to be sane voices in his ear, helping him to steer the ship the rest of the way through here. But again, at a time,
We're really all in this together at this point.
we are, and it's
The virus doesn't know about, you know, Fox News versus MSNBC.
yeah. That's true, and again, we are all in this together, and that is something that we need to be mindful of, and that is something that we're trying to promote here with the show. But again, you know, always what we're looking to do with the show is to have great and enlightening conversations on different topics, and we've been through a number of them with you over a period of time, William Cohan. Thank you very much for your thoughts in these troubled times here, and you know, knowledge for a lot of people can make them feel a little bit better. So you gave people some food for thought here, and I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, and I'm always looking forward to the next time we can do it. Thank you so much, William, and thank you everybody for tuning in to FDH Lounge mini episode number 1205.